Hello, my name is Kian. I just finished my first year of medical school, and so in today's video I'm going to be talking about some things that were a little unexpected and things that I wish I had done differently in my first year. I will be breaking this video down into 4 categories, so if there's something that you are specifically interested in, I'll leave timestamps in the description below so that you can skip to the part of the video that you want to watch. This probably will be a bit of a lengthy, rambly video. So section 1 is going to be about studying, section 2 will be on time management, section 3 will be financial, and section 4 will be social. So first, let's talk about studying. I went into medical school thinking it was going to be the hardest thing in my life, thinking that there was going to be piles and piles of textbooks that I'd have to read and just an insane amount of content. That was not quite the case. Yes, there's a lot of content that we have to learn, but it wasn't as huge or as unmanageable as I had perceived it as before even starting school. And I think if I had known ahead of time how manageable med school was, I might have changed my approaches to studying. So, first mistake with studying was that I wanted to know everything. I wanted to memorize every detail. I wanted to know every receptor and every enzyme. And in the grand scheme of things, that stuff really wasn't important. And that stuff wasn't really on the exams. So, a huge waste of time. But another problem with that is by trying to memorize these tiny details, I really lost sight of the big picture. And yeah, sure, I know enzyme A binds with substrate X, but I don't really know the clinical implications of that because I've spent so much time memorizing it. So yeah, that was a big mistake, and I wish I had just had the foresight to be okay, settle down, you don't need to know all the details, and just by understanding the physiologic principles, there's a lot of things that you can sort of logic your way out of. This is a little damaging, just because you spend so much time, and it's very frustrating trying to memorize all these things, especially when they're kind of useless, even though they teach them to you. So the second thing that I wish I had done differently was not be so set on studying independently. I love a study session alone in my house with my tea and my snacks and nobody to disturb me, and that worked really well in undergrad, but it also worked really well in medical school. However, there were opportunities where people would say, hey, you want to come study this with us? And I'd be like, no, because I had this fear that it would be inefficient or a waste of time, and I just had this idea that I could be more efficient with it on my own, which to an extent may have been true, but I think your stamina and your ability to study for longer periods of time is increased when you're having fun or you're studying with your friends. So areas where I found this really helpful towards the end of the year were things that were straight up memorization and not a lot of thought. So anatomy, micrographs, neuroanatomy, histology, radiology. A group of friends and I just got together, we booked a room, we plugged our laptops into the TV, we showed different images, and we just quizzed each other, and it was so much fun. So figure out what works for you in terms of studying in groups or studying alone and just optimize that. But I think I just wish I had been more open to trying different people's techniques sooner, because I would have had a lot more fun. Another issue I had was I tried to reinvent the study wheel. I had essentially figured out how to study pretty well in undergrad, but for some reason when I entered med school, I was like, I'm going to use all these different resources that I've never even used in my life before. I'm going to use all this different software, all these weird online things, and I'm just going to crush my exams. And it kind of worked, but it was a bit of a waste of time. So allow me to explain. We have lecturers who give us a lecture, and they submit, I don't know how many questions, let's say 10 questions, to a question bank, and then the person who makes our exam chooses 2 of those questions per lecture from the question bank and makes our exam. So the logical thing to do would be to study the lectures because that's what our exams are based off of. But no, I had a different idea. I read so many textbooks that were somewhat related to the topics that we talked about in lecture, but had so much extraneous information. And this was a huge waste of time, but also a huge waste of brain space as you're trying to memorize these extra concepts that really aren't that important. Second thing was, I thought that Anki would teach me everything. So I took the lecture slides and I was like, if I just memorize every lecture slide by using the amazing software of Anki, I'll know everything. Lol, what a joke. First of all, that is so boring. You're not going to get through all those cards if you're just literally trying to memorize facts from a lecture slide or you're copy and pasting lecture notes into Anki. And I love this statement that someone made in a podcast I was listening to. Andre Agassi is a very famous tennis player, and he's really good. And the guy was saying it's not so much the tool as it is the user. You have to be good and you have to know how to use the tool in order for it to work. He said if you gave me Andre Agassi's fancy racket, I would still be terrible at tennis. And vice versa, if you gave Andre Agassi the worst wooden racket ever, he would still kick my butt. And what he's getting at is it's the skill of the tennis player themselves, which is allowing them to excel. And I think that is applicable to Anki as well. It's the discipline of the student who's reviewing the Anki cards, as well as sort of the thought that goes into making these cards that will allow you to memorize things. The software itself isn't going to make you this genius who can remember everything. So I think I overused Anki and I didn't use it in its best efficiency early on. However, if you watch my final exam scram vlog, I really like the methods that I used for Anki. And there's things that I've been out of lectures for almost a month and a half now, and they're still stuck in my brain. So if you're interested, please let me know in the comments below and I can make a more detailed sort of study video / how I use Anki. Another thing that I did was I used a lot of USMLE resources, a lot of question banks, and again, this was kind of counterproductive because it's really hard to filter through all the USMLE resources and find what is relevant or what lines up with your lecture material and then try and answer questions on that, when in reality, one, we don't even write the STEP exams in Canada, so the USMLE stuff, yes, medicine's universal and it applies, but it wasn't directly applicable to our curriculum. So, in summary, what I would have done differently and what I did towards the end of the year, which yielded my best exam results for everything throughout first year medical school, was just really focus on the lecture slides and really understand them and go off on learning tangents based on what's on the lecture slides, but not try and learn everything about cardiology that's ever been published just because we had a cardiology lecture. So the next topic is time management. I had such difficulty with this, which I don't know why, because I'm a fairly organized person. However, again, back to reinventing the study wheel, I was kind of reinventing the timetable. So when I started medical school, I really avoided signing up for a ton of clubs or going to every event. I signed up for a few things and I went to a few events, but I really didn't want to overdo it because I wanted to test the waters and see what the workload was. I didn't want to get a month in and have a mental breakdown or get super sick or just be super burnt out because I spread myself too thin. In hindsight, I think I was a little too conservative with this. I think I could have been a bit more involved and I would have been fine. But would I go back and change it? It's hard to say. It's a challenging balance, and I think learning through experience was the best way to sort of figure out how much involvement is going to optimize my quality of life versus how much is too much in order to sort of still be able to focus on why I'm here, which is med school and learning medical content. So I think just the perception that medical school was a lot harder than it turned out to be held me back just a tiny bit, but I'm not saying go crazy, do a ton more. like if this is how much I signed up for and how much I was involved, I'd probably increase it by like that much. So not a lot, but something to keep in mind if you are starting medical school. My biggest mistake, however, with time management was not using our schedules the way they were designed. So what I mean is our faculty works really hard to give allotted curricular time for different things. Like, you're supposed to be in lecture from this time to this time, you're supposed to be in lab at this time, and in medical school everything is recorded. So like, you could watch lectures in the middle of the night if you want. You could, like, you just have to watch them after they've been posted, essentially. So there's kind of zero incentive to show up. Labs are not necessary, they never take attendance. Like, you don't have to show up to labs. This is literally for your own learning experience. And I went to most of the lectures and I went to most of the labs, but I went through like a short month phase where I was like, I'm gonna be more efficient, I'm gonna create more time for myself, and I'm gonna watch the lectures on my own. And surprise, it was not more efficient. So the reason why I think people feel that they can get lectures done faster is that you can rewatch them on like double time speed. But for me, like, maybe some people this works, but for me, like, I'd watch it on double time speed, but then I'd have to pause it and like Google stuff, like, oh, what was that word? Or I'd have to rewind it because I missed what they said. And by the end of that, what was supposed to be 30 minutes, it would end up being an hour, which is the exact same amount of time it would have taken to have watched it live. So you might be thinking, well, it's still nice to have to pause it, it's still nice to be able to Google it, you probably got a better experience out of it, but for me this wasn't the case. So for one, it took the exact same amount of time, but I wasn't as focused because I'm at home with all my distractions, and there's also decision fatigue. So before starting a lecture, I'd be like, do I want to watch this at Starbucks? Do I want to watch this in my bed? Do I want to watch this at my desk? What kind of snack do I want? But if you just go to the lecture, you don't have to make that decision. You're going to watch the lecture in the lecture hall, and that's kind of the end of story. And another thing was motivation to get started. So again, if you just show up to the lecture, well, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. But if you're sitting there with your computer, you might like scroll Instagram for a bit, check Facebook, and then you've wasted like another 15 minutes because you didn't have the motivation just to start the lecture. So yes, if you're someone like me, maybe go to the lectures. I think it evens out, and whatever works best for you is what you should stick with, and feel free to experiment. But at the end of the day, if you think you're going to be quicker watching the lectures on your own, it's probably going to even out, or it's going to be like a slight decrease, like maybe you save 10 minutes, but like in the grand scheme of things, like you're probably just going to take that 10 minutes and have a break anyways, because you're like, oh phew, I can reward myself because I was faster than the actual lecture. Another mistake I made was not using the allotted curricular time for labs. So essentially, you show up to the anatomy lab or the histology lab, and you're there to look at stuff. So at the anatomy lab, you do your dissection and you look at things, and then you can leave. The lab is 3 hours long, the dissection usually takes half an hour, and then people usually stick around for 15 more minutes, and then people leave, and I was totally part of that group. It's the end of the day, I want a nap. But you miss out on 2 hours and 15 minutes of being able to talk to the instructors and ask them questions. Oh, second semester, first year, I did this, and oh my gosh, I don't mean to brag, but like I literally killed that section of the exam. I did fantastic on all the lab stuff, and it's not because I'm smart, it's just because I stuck around and I would ask questions, and you know, these people want to help you, and like they didn't intentionally tell me what was on the exam, but they're going to tell you what's important, and they're going to tell you mnemonics and ways to remember things, and they're going to tell you things that other students always mess up on. And yeah, I literally didn't have to do any work. I hardly studied outside of the labs, I just stayed there for the allotted time, and what do you know, it worked out great. So I think it was kind of ironic that when I used the schedule that they gave us the way it was intended, I did a lot better than when I tried to make my own schedule and study on my own and take breaks on my own. So, experiment, but I think it's probably pretty safe to trust the system. Another concept that I think really is applicable to time is that it fills the space that you give it. I think time is like a gas. So if you have a huge room, the gas fills the room, and if you have a tiny container, the gas will fill the container. And this space, whether it be the container or the room, represents how much time you give yourself. So a great example of this would be doing the laundry. If you put on Netflix and you're like, okay, I'm gonna fold this little pile of laundry over the next half hour, guess what? You will take the full half hour to fold that laundry. However, if you're running out the door to head to, I don't know, your fitness class in the morning, and you just spend the last 5 minutes before you have to leave folding laundry, you're gonna finish the laundry in the 5 minutes because of like that time pressure, even though it's the same task. So you can apply this to studying and more mundane tasks that you have to do. Just give yourself a deadline and you'll be that much more efficient. Let's talk about money. So, finance. It is no secret that medical school is expensive. I'm very lucky that in Canada we are very well supported by the government, both the provincial and federal, in providing loans but also subsidizing our tuition. So compared to the US, like, whew, it's a lot cheaper. However, it's still like a very expensive experience. Tuition is just one small part of it. You're also not really working a full-time job, so you're losing out on a ton of potential income. You're making way less money than all of your friends that are working, and so you kind of have less financial leeway in a lot of respects. But here are things that I wish I had known before medical school, or things I wish I had done differently in the financial department. One is I wish I had planned for medical school. This kind of seems like a no-brainer, but I applied to medical school. I started sort of prepping for my application at the end of second year, so that's when I wrote my MCAT, and then I applied throughout third year, doing all the different things you have to do related to an application, and then I was accepted at the end of third year after applying once. And throughout this process, I really didn't think I was a strong candidate. I didn't think I would get in, and I really have no idea how I stack up against the other applicants, but after I've been in medical school, I don't think I was like bottom of the barrel as far as like who they chose. But again, like, I have no authority in deciding that, and really no solid evidence, just a feeling. I haven't felt like, oh my god, like everyone's like 500 times smarter than me. It's a huge mistake that I was accepted. I do feel that like I'm going with the flow, fitting in with the crowd. But this thought that I had that I would never be accepted hindered me from saving up for medical school, because I thought, I probably won't get in until fourth year, or maybe after that, maybe I'll have to work a few years. And to me, I know this sounds really messed up, but to me, saving for medical school would have been like saying, I expect to be accepted. And to me, I thought that would be like so psychologically damaging to plan my life around this acceptance and then get rejected. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sad. But really, I would have just had extra money in the bank. I would have continued with my education and gotten in eventually and had like a chunk of savings. And so, yeah, I didn't work as much as perhaps I could have or should have. I didn't save. I love to spend money. I went traveling. I incurred like a lot of extra expenses. So, yes, in hindsight, I would have planned ahead. I wasn't poor going into med school. I lived in a nice apartment during my first year. I ate like nice food. I still went out. Like, I wasn't living off of beans. But I think I just would have maybe gone out a little more, gone to the movies with friends a few more times if I had just like a little more leeway in the budget. So yeah, moral of the story, plan ahead. Second thing is don't get too caught up in the budget. For a very large portion of people, medical school is like an expense that they're not ready to handle, even if they've worked ahead of time. So I think just accepting that you are going to incur some sort of debt along the way, and that's okay. I had a weekly budget very strictly laid out in a spreadsheet, and if I was $20 over, I'd be like, oh my god, $20 over in 1 week, that's so much extra that maybe I'll have no money left by the end of the year, blah 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 blah, and just it was unnecessary stress. So what? You spent an extra 20 bucks on 5 lattes. Just live your life. Be aware of your spending and your expenses, and big picture, think ahead, and don't spend erratically or irrationally, but enjoy life. I don't know. I think I stressed a little too much about money. Here I am fine. I still have more than $0 in my bank account, which I think that's quite an accomplishment to not have a huge pile of debt coming out of first year. Alright, the last section of this video, this very long video, if you're still here, thank you for watching, is social. So I actually wrote some stuff down here because I was reflecting about the social life in medical school, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and I don't want this to come out wrong or negative. Allow me to explain myself, but I do think there are some striking similarities between being in med school and being in a cult. Yeah, really freaky. There's a lot of negative connotations associated with cults, and I don't want to get into that. I'm not an expert on cults by any means, but I don't mean to impose those negative associations onto med school. Med school's been a very positive experience, but just the exercise of comparison has been really interesting. So number one is sort of isolation. You're always with med school people. For the first semester, literally the only people that I talked to on a regular basis, more than 3-4 times a week, that weren't in med school were my immediate family and my boyfriend. I have lots of friends that aren't in med school, but you're just so busy and you're so overwhelmed, and you're from 8 to 5, you're always with these people in medical school, and then you go home and you study and you sleep. All the clubs and all the events you go to, they're all med school people, so that was kind of weird. So I guess knowing that ahead of time, I think it's helpful to know that you have to put a lot of effort in to sort of maintain those relationships that aren't naturally occurring through seeing people every day. Because yeah, you are sort of isolated in medical school. We have a building that's other allied healthcare professionals use it, but it's kind of the med school building. So again, you're always with med students. Second thing is, it's really hard to leave. So yes, it's really hard to leave the cult, and it's actually really hard to leave medical school. I haven't looked into it a lot, but for one, this is Canadian medical school, specifically my medical school. I know this is different around the world. However, once you're accepted, they are really invested in making you a doctor and helping you succeed. So our medical school, and all medical schools, as far as I'm aware in Canada, are pass-fail. But if you fail, you don't get kicked out, you get to rewrite, and you get a ton of support. You get people helping you figure out where you went wrong, how you can study more. They give you different resources. This is official faculty members helping you pass the exam. And if you fail that, I'm pretty sure they let you rewrite again. If you fail an OSCE, they'll be okay, you failed the station, this is what you did wrong, let's practice together, and they test you again. And it's okay. So in that respect, it's hard to leave, but also leaving for personal reasons, really hard to do. It's way more common for people to take a leave of absence for a year, but they're still in medical school. You can't just pack your bags and leave. And there's a lot of reasons why, and I don't know them all, but if I had to sort of speculate. I think one is it's a huge investment, it's a huge cost to the taxpayer to put a medical student through medical school, and if you've already invested a year into this person, you kind of want them to finish the job because it's a huge amount of money and time, both on the faculty's end, the government's end, but the student's end as well. So they just kind of like push you through and they're like, nope, you're not leaving. We're gonna make you a doctor. So yeah, that's kind of weird. Third thing is you're forced to study in quotation marks. And yeah, no one's like holding a gun to your head being like, yo, you gotta study. But there's social pressure to do well, and it's just like a culture of studying and working hard to know things, but also by virtue of the program, the amount of content that you have to know and how testing is administered, yeah, you essentially have to study. And like, again, comparing it to a cult, like, again, no one's like putting a gun to your head, but there's a lot of psychological and social pressure to do certain things. Oh, and then the last one is like certain ideologies are kind of pushed on you or a lot more accepted. So cult, very extreme, you kind of like worship the cult leader and whatever they stand for. In medical school, not so much. They're like very open to conversations and different points of view, but I personally felt that there was always like an underlying majority on certain sides of different subjects. And it's subtle, but you know it's there. So let's think of an example. Oh, okay, so we had a lecturer and he just kind of made an off-the-cuff comment. He like poked a joke at Trump, and like you could feel that like 90% of the class was like, oh, ha ha. And you get this idea that everyone in med school is anti-Trump. I don't care what your beliefs are or who you support in a different country if you're a Canadian med student. But then one guy pressed his mic and he's like, I'm actually a Trump supporter and I find that very offensive. And the guy was like, oh, like, sorry. But yeah, you get this feeling that like almost everyone is on one side or another on certain issues and almost pressured to go along with the bandwagon on those things. But it's not like tangible, like you couldn't present evidence to like a board at the school being like, we're forced to think a certain way or agree with certain ideologies, because it's really subtle. One thing that I think is really positive is right now we're pushing patient-centered care. So basically, say a patient comes into your clinic and they have hypertension. Nowadays, it's really important to consult the patient and ask them what they want. Say, okay, hypertension is an issue. 1, are you interested in lowering your blood pressure? Or 2, are you not? And how do you want to approach this? We can create dietary changes, we can help you exercise more, or we can prescribe a pill, or we can do any combination of the above. And the patient and the doctor both are part of that decision process. So if the patient is outdoorsy and they like exercising or whatever, they might say, I'm going to try the exercise and diet route first, and if that doesn't work, we can go on to medications. And that's like the ideology that's pushed nowadays, that we consult the patient, and I think that's excellent because ultimately it should be the patient's decision. But 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been accepted. You go to the doctor, they tell you what to do, and you do it. So yeah, just that pushing ideas on med students and like having us all agree and being like, woo, that's great, that's the best. And right now it seems like the best, but maybe 50 years from now, like new med students will be like, oh my god, I can't believe they agreed with that back in the day. Second thing that I think I knew, but it was interesting to see it in action, is that your social life will change. So you're gonna meet a ton of new people. It's interesting because you're putting all these people together and there's so many commonalities and like so many stereotypes that apply. There's a lot of people that are like super fit and super athletic. There's like a chunk of med students, and then there's a chunk that are super into creating social change and pushing initiatives in like social, cultural areas. And then there's a group of med students that are super musical and just really artsy and very talented. And then there's a group of med students that are super into like tech and coding and robotics. And so for this reason, I think it's actually really easy to connect with other med students. So you make some really strong bonds and you form these wonderful new relationships because one, you're bound by this common experience of med school, and two, you have a lot of common interests. So I think just understanding that you're going to make some lifelong friendships without even knowing it was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to see how these friendships blossom. However, a lot of other friendships will fade away. I had a lot of friends going in, and we still are friends, but it's just like I live in this world that they're not like a part of. It's hard, like it's not, again, it's not tangible and there's no solid evidence, but my 9 to 5 or my 8 to 5 day looks so different from theirs, and I'm experiencing things that a lot of my friends like have never even heard of or might not even understand. So yeah, I think just like being okay with the fluidity of your social connections and putting in the effort to maintain those that are important, but just letting the ones go that naturally should go has been like a journey. An interesting observation that I've had for a lot of people in medical school is it really tests your personal relationships. And I'm talking about like boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever floats your boat. So a lot of people in medical school, like in the first year, people have gotten engaged or they have broken up. Two kind of extremes, but I think like just the intensity of the program on this one person in the relationship really tests how strong that bond is and how much patience your partner has and how supportive they are. So yeah, like I would say like so many people that started med school with a relationship have like ended things by the end of the year, and these are things that I personally like didn't see coming. These are people that had been together for like 3+ years, and then on the other end, like quite a few people have gotten engaged or had their first baby. So yeah, if you want to know if someone's like legit about being with you, just go to med school. The last thing is this idea of social sacrifices. So there are a lot of times that I have been around and people are like, let's go to the club tonight, or let's go out for dinner, let's go see this play, let's go see this movie, or even small things like, oh, dinner at my parents tonight. It's like, oh, sorry, I can't, like I have a big exam tomorrow, or oh, sorry, I can't, I'm just like so behind. And I definitely started with this mindset of like, I have to study or I have to do this, and I've sort of shifted it to this idea of saying I get to. So I get to study anatomy, I get to learn about hypertension, and that's a huge privilege, because a year ago when I wasn't in med school, I would have done anything to have that opportunity. So I guess shifting that mindset of sacrifice to opportunity has been really helpful, but also finding moderation. So like maybe 50% of the time when I should be doing work, I'll say no, I can't go, but the other 50% of the time I'll be like, I didn't go last time, you know what, this can wait till tomorrow, or I'll just be up a little later tonight. It's important to me to have this social contact. Anyways, that brings us to the end of a very long and lengthy rambly video, but I hope you enjoyed just sitting down and chatting. I hope you found some of this information interesting or useful, and if you're starting your medical school journey, good luck. All the best to you. It's fun and like welcome to the ride. However, if you're like ahead of me in 2nd, 3rd, 4th year residency practicing physician, I would love to hear in the comments below what kind of advice or things you weren't expecting when you started medical school, because not only will that be helpful to me, but also other people watching this video. Also, I hope you enjoyed the kidney in the background. Fun fact, the kidney is my favorite organ. He is featured in almost all of my videos, so yeah, look out for the kidney. Anyway, anyways, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, and always let me know what you think in the comments below. I love reading the comments, and I will see you in the next video.